Welcome to Transforming Us podcast. I'm Jess.
And I'm Tamara. We're trauma-informed relationship coaches and old friends here to discuss common patterns and what leads us to paths of security.
You know, people are feeling overwhelmed and disconnected in their painful relationships, which often leads to mental health crises.
We want to share some new ideas and practices to help you cultivate curiosity, compassion, and to redeem the patterns in your relationships, starting with yourself.
Join us on this journey of transforming us. Grab a cup of coffee and let's dive in. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have Tamara here and we are talking about the Enneagram. So it's just going to be a general primer. We've touched on it in previous episodes, just dropping some numbers here and there. And it is really core to what she and I want to teach about because it's so transformative for relationships. So today is just going to be kind of the foundation, the basics. So if you love deep dives, like stay tuned for future episodes. We're going to get deeper into it, but we will touch on all the numbers today and the basic history and system, and so it'll be fun. So how's it going?
It is going good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Lots of energy today. I just feel like jazzed.
Yeah. Good. What's making you feel jazzed extra today, do you think?
Well, I do love this topic. I love the Enneagram. I always have. It literally changed the trajectory of my husband and I's marriage. You know, it's helped in parenting. I'm going to be sharing it with my church here soon. Yeah. It's just a really amazing tool. Just a tool, but it is very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. For sure. I'm excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah. So what's been going on with you?
Just all the things with parenting and life and, you know, recording podcasts with you and just, you know, art and it's good. It's all good things.
I was thinking recently about season of life and just our stage. You and I are both similar in that sense of we're entering kind of a new project or this new dream of something that wasn't what we thought our life was going to be.
Right.
So for me, my husband and I have land in Tennessee and we were about to launch a retreat center. And the more we prayed on it, we just landed on it's not the right time.
Yeah.
And so we put years into that thinking that was going to be our next thing. But I internally last year, about a year ago, had to do this process of what do I want? Like, what am I going to do? Then you and I started having these conversations and dreamed up this project of transforming us.
Right.
And really has turned into something that I'm just really proud of. But it's definitely a little perplexing because I look back and go, God, what are you doing?
Yeah. And I think that's like such a cool thing. I feel very similar with you because I had worked so hard to build my art business, but just over time feeling like there's something else that I feel like I have to give. I have this whole pulling me to the relational side of life and people. So it's just so cool when you feel like those things like just sort of merge now, you know?
Things shift and sometimes what you thought you were going to do for a purpose or for a job or whatever just isn't sustainable or it's just not working anymore. I love 2 Corinthians 4 where Paul talks about the but nots, right? We are perplexed but not driven to despair is one of them. And I just think curiosity and leaning into going like, okay, when you're perplexed and you don't know what is happening and you're being asked to be flexible or make a change or whatever, what does that look like? Remembering like we don't have to go to despair because we have a God that's in control and we can be curious and just like co-create with him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I love that.
So let's jump in.
Okay. So we are going to be talking about the Enneagram. And we're very passionate about the Enneagram and attachment theory, which, you know, I'm sure y'all have figured out by this point. But the reason why we love it so much is because it's just such an amazing tool for growth and awareness of just the patterns in our relationships and the patterns, you know, we can see within ourselves. You know, just to say, like, we want to make sure we say, like, people are not math problems and, you know, there's not a perfect formula because people are all unique. But so it's not to put in a box, but it is just to help us have an understanding of how the different numbers are wired by personality and how that plays out. So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I love that whole idea that, it's not putting you in a box. It's sort of, I think Ian Cron was the one that said this. He teaches on the Enneagram and has a podcast called Typology that we love. But he says it's not putting you inside a box, it's showing you the box that you're already in and how to get out. So that is really helpful because if you use the Enneagram in a healthy way as a tool that is designed to be used in that way, is to grow and transform and move around in the system. And so, we'll talk a lot in future episodes about balancing and, there's centers within the system and there's arrows and there's wings and stances and instincts, harmony and harmonic groups. And so it's a very complex system, and it has to be because people are very complex. And each of those groups represents something different about how we function psychologically, emotionally, relationally. And so it's very interesting, but it's not about just you are a number and this is how you are.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Today's going to be just that overview.
Right. Yeah. Today's episode is just going to be just an overview because there's so much detail to each number. So we're just going to touch on like a primer of each number and just help understand like the specific gifts and ways that a person can relate, and we can dive deeper on further future episodes.
So let's start with a working definition. The Enneagram is a comprehensive psychological and spiritual framework that identifies 9 distinct personality patterns. Representing the 9-pointed interconnecting lines, it serves as a tool for understanding personal patterns and enhancing self-awareness and discovering pathways to security in your life and in your relationships. So that's kind of our working definition for it. There's lots of other ones out there, but for what we use it for, it just, Enneagram, the word means 9-pointed shape. So there's 9 numbers, and it's just like 9 ways of seeing the world. It began observing that people have these different patterns. And so people have always asked, like Socrates said, know thyself, but then, Christians have said, the most important thing is you have to know God. You kind of have to do both. You really have to have a robust relationship with understanding yourself to really fully know God too. So, the psychological roots of the Enneagram has been many different influences. So I can't possibly cover all of the, not only just the origins, but just because it's been a system that has been developed by psychologists, and it has also been at the same time a spiritual tool that people have used, and it has been used well, and it has been used in crazy ways. So again, knowing it is just a tool, and people can use tools in the right or wrong way. So Carl Jung is a psychologist that I would love to note that he taught on the idea of true self versus false self. It's actually a very biblical way to look at knowing yourself and understanding the Enneagram. It's this idea that we have kind of this old self, like Paul talked about in scripture, that we have this old self, and as we grow in being sanctified, we become a new self. We become transformed. And so we put off the old self and we put on the new self. So when Carl Jung talked about true self and false self, it's just very well fits with at least my faith that it's good to do this process of understanding my inner patterns and emotions and things. So
yeah, it's interesting how attachment theory also, you can see how it plays into the different 9 numbers of Enneagram, which we can touch on, very briefly in this episode, but it's very fascinating how it all interworks together.
Yeah. And I mean, when as humans we're developing as little people, trying to just get our needs met. And so attachment theory is big about that, but then the Enneagram, it kind of just measures, where did you go with that?
Right.
If you were a 3 and you thought that doing a good job or performing or being successful was how you got love and belonging,
Right.
That's attachment and Enneagram.
Right.
And both helpful.
Right. And also bringing in just the topic of neuroscience and how our nervous system also plays in to how we respond, depending on what number you are and your attachment style.
Mm-hmm.
And so just the process of how everything really does truly like interconnect, and it coordinates just these different parts of the brain and how we end up actually working, like how things play out. And then once we have the awareness of that, it's like that's where you really have room to discover and grow and just become, the healthiest version of yourself by seeing these patterns.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think of integration as the experience of shalom. It's a peaceful, whole, connected place, but these parts, and you can process thinking, feeling, and doing all at the same time. And so the only way to get there is awareness.
Yeah.
And observing yourself in those different ways.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what the Enneagram is not. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that is, people have an idea of what they think it might be and why they want to avoid it. So this will help with that. The Enneagram is not a label. It's not a box. Like we said, it's not an excuse for bad behavior. Some people will say, well, that's just how I am, or this is how I'm wired, and that's an excuse. If somebody's trying to give you feedback or share something with you that maybe you need to hear about your personality, saying those things, or just say, well, that's, I'm an 8. They don't understand me. They think I'm just a bully and this is just how I'm wired.
Right.
You can approach it that way. It's important to know you have patterns, but it's not an excuse for bad behavior. It's not a reason to avoid things that make you uncomfortable or are outside of your comfort zone. It's just a low resolution assessment of where you are.
So the next topic would be centers of intelligence. And it's just basically the theory of being born with a center or a temperament. And so when we break down the different numbers, you have, the heart, the gut, and the more logic way they basically interpret and think through life and relationships and how they basically cope with, things. Instinctive body center, the ones that would feel it more like in their gut, would be the type 8, 9, and the 1. And they're going to have a lot of like instinctual awareness, and they're going to actually feel it in the body. And I know I've talked with, some people that have, that have the 8, the 9, and the 1. And it is interesting hearing them talk about like how, they literally will have like a visceral sensation that is almost like, I have to do something. Like their gut will basically be the first thing they feel, and their mind will have to catch up, but their gut feels it usually before the mind does. And so it's interesting.
Well, and these body types, these gut types, as little children, are the kinesthetic learners. They're the ones that are like jumping all over the furniture, and they learn through doing. They learn through touching. They learn through physicality. And so even just looking back to the type of child you might have been, that is an indicator sometimes of the temperament or the center that you have.
Yeah. And then as far as the heart center, which I really resonate with because I am more of a heart-centered type 3 that definitely has the wing of a 2 and a 4. So, it's interesting. I can speak like I feel it first in my emotions through my relationships, and my brain will have to catch up. That's, I will feel it very strong in my heart though. And so you just have to be careful though to also factor in the logic, because if we're only leaning on the heart, then it can get us, in trouble too. So it's like that learning to have to pair in the all three, signaling, what does my heart say? What is my logic saying? What is my gut saying? Before you really make some major decisions.
Yeah.
So,
I also resonate with the heart center. I'm a 4.
mhm,
So I definitely leaned 3-wing most of my life until recently. I think I'm leaning more 5-wing some days.
mhm,
But connections, relationships, these heart center or feeling center, you might have heard it said, temperaments, as children are the ones that might be quick to cry about things or feel lonely or disconnected if they were in trouble. You know, they're going to care a lot about helping others or, making friends or just keeping everybody connected. They're just feelers. And
yeah,
you see those sensitive souls very young,
mhm,
even in 2 and 3-year-olds, what that looks like as a temperament.
yeah, for sure. And then as far as the last, we can touch on is the thinking head center. That would be the type 5, 6, and 7s. They're going to be very focused on their thoughts, just on their ideas, on their plans. They're going to be the more logical, they're going to probably think they're better at removing the emotion and the feelings when it comes to even things that are really hard to make decisions on. They can kind of shut the heart down a little bit and let the logical brain be the thing that ultimately lands the decision, which I feel like it's good to understand these things about the different centers of intelligence because, for like a 2 who thinks so much with their heart in relationships, it would be hard for them to relate to, say, a 5 who, they both feel things, but they go about it very differently and how they make their decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and 5, 6s, and 7s in that thinking center are so aware of security and needing security and safety. That is something that when they were young, they probably were the observers. They were
Mm-hmm.
the ones that were, watching and just being very aware of what everybody else was doing and their thinking and their planning and their strategizing even at a very young age. And so you can see that in adulthood, especially the 5 and the 6. The 7 has so much energy. They're planning and strategizing, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like at rapid speed. They're kind of outrunning their anxiety a little bit, and then we'll get into kind of core emotions. I think I'll go back. The 8, 9, and 1, their core emotion is going to be anger. And then the core emotion for the 2s, 3s, and 4s is shame or sadness. And then for 5, 6s, and 7s in the thinking center is going to be fear or anxiety. So
Yeah.
that's important to
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. So as far as our centers and our spouse's center, do you want to go first, Jess?
Yeah, I think my experience as a 4 in the heart center is really that I lead with my emotions. But as far as intelligence center, being so aware of relationships, my husband, he is in the gut body center as a type 8. He will have a gut response towards a parenting situation, and I will have a heart response of seeing things through connection and disconnection in relationships. He's kind of that justice, right and wrong, make a quick decision. And I'm like, let's talk it through. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. And there are sometimes like his gut is right. Like he knows exactly what needs to happen. And I complicate things sometimes with getting overly emotional about the decisions. And then there are times that my emotion and sensitivity to relationships is needed,
Mm-hmm.
and he's trying to act too quickly. So we balance each other out in that way when we can listen to one another. What about you?
Well, me being a 3, it's interesting. I feel like I have over the years I think I'm more swinging to a higher wing of a 2 as I've gotten older. I think part of it is maybe because I was always very driven. Like I wanted to succeed. I wanted success. Like that was like the most important thing to me in my 20s. And it wasn't a question of if I was going to get there. It was just when and how. And I think in time, as I had hit certain successes and milestones, I feel like the 3 part of me has kind of calmed down. It's like that itch has kind of been scratched. I'm like, okay, I've kind of proven to myself some things. And I feel like the 2 is stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting if you can kind of sit back and like look at your, your younger self versus currently,
Mm-hmm.
my spouse is a 7. We met when we were like late teens, and, he was the middle child and of 3 boys. And, he was just very like little energizer bunny, up for anything, very flexible, just it's all good type of personality. And I've watched how his wing 8 has really gotten a lot more predominant as he's gotten older, because he runs and owns a construction company, so he has project managers and he has field guys working for him. So his level of responsibility of has really made the 8 rise in him, to
Mm-hmm.
where he's not, I mean, he's still fun loving, but like there's a level of
Strength.
yeah, well, stress and high strength to be able to do the job that he does. And now he's a father, and he's, we have teen girls, and it's just, I feel like overall we have, especially in our earlier selves, I feel like we really meshed really well, as far as like we didn't typically run into huge conflicts, because I feel like our 3 and the 7, we were different, but we were still similar enough in the way we viewed life. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like as we've shifted, you know, in the years, and we have more stress and parenting and, running companies and things like that, it's like we've had to learn how to, you know, really hear each other out more, because he's more in the, you know, like I'm in the heart space, and, he's going to think more logically at this
Mm-hmm.
point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting to think about the that sometimes we balance one wing first and then we move on to the next one. And so like in your case, it sounded like you were classic 3 in your 20s, and then your 30s may have been a little bit more of the 4, and then now you've really gone into as your late 30s and you're going into the 2. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm still
Yeah.
3, but I feel like the 2 is just really
Yeah.
become a lot more predominant now.
And it's perfect though, because that's what wings are for. They
Right.
are to balance so that you're not in your dominant center too much, that
Right.
you're accessing the resources from these other numbers that are close to your number. And why this system is designed so perfectly, I don't think any one person made it. And that goes back to the history, is that it has been people observing people and patterns that it eventually has become what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Each contributor has found new parts of the system, but because humans are so complex and we're designed by God, it's just taken this time of people observing people and then putting language to the system. And it's just so accurate.
Right.
And then let's talk a little bit about stances. Stances are social posture in situations of disappointment or conflict. The aggressive or assertive stance. Most people don't like the word aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
but you have the stronger stance folks that are the 3s, 7s, and 8s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so these are the people that in disappointments or conflicts, they have a clear idea of what they want and they assert themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They say, this is what I think should happen. Join me in my ideas, and they're just moving in a direction. So it's a little bit of that at energy coming at people. And for those that don't have that stance, sometimes they misunderstand it as like, whoa, why are you being so strong?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
do you want to talk about the compliance stance?
Yeah. So I feel like the compliant, like when I think about compliant, I think about specifically a 2, but in the more like just more probably coming from more of a heart space of like there could be some people pleasing. Like I know, the fears, the 2's fear is, to be unloved. So they can tend to be a lot more compliant when it comes to just wanting to keep peace with people, learning how to speak up more for your needs.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, it's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, definitely a marker with the compliant stance is that the view of others, and there's this toward energy where 1s, 2s, and 6s are moving towards other people and kind of saying, well, what do they need? And like you said, with twos in relationships. So yeah, that social compliance is the best way I know how to categorize those. And they're looking at conflicts and disappointments as kind of from that perspective, not from looking at themselves and what they want as much. Then with the withdrawn stance would be the 4s, 5s, and 9s. So we'll talk more in depth on every number next, type by type.
And then as far as like the withdrawn, they're the ones like, they're going to naturally retreat a little bit more when they are needing to think. They're not going to want to be pushing closer for connection if something is stressful, whereas the 2 or the 3 is going to be relational and you make me feel better by being closer. Whereas, the 5 would be like, okay, I need some space. I've got to go think. I need to be withdrawn and have the solitude in order to get back to myself, The
4s, 5s, and 9s, they tend to go away and internally self-reflect when there's a conflict or something that they are upset about. That's how they process. Now, sometimes they can stay away too long and not communicate well and just stay inside themselves. But that's where the balance and the work comes in, is that we need all 3 of these stances. So they're kind of a sequence of what you typically show up as first. You have your dominant stance, and then you have a second one that you try out to try to balance next, and then the third one might be the more repressed one. So just knowing that about yourself and knowing your patterns can help you navigate conflicts better.
Right. So we can transition into the next topic, which is really, the main parts of this episode is breaking down a primer for each Enneagram type. And so, again, we just want to continue to highlight that, we first relate to God, then ourselves, and then to others. To be looking for as you listen to these different types, think about yourself or think about, those that you love. And it's really cool to kind of, see what you can learn. But basically a type 1, they are going to be the ones that are typically, they're like very good at like planning. They are very, have a sense of like wanting to be right or wrong. They like to create order. That would be their gifts, is they would create order. They have like a standard of integrity. They have a need feeling, gut, that they want to be good or they want to be right. They are concerned with justice and they want to be able to, reform what's wrong. And so, they can tend to focus on right or wrong. So they can be a little more, I feel like, black and white as far as being able to remove, even emotions a little bit more, when they can just be like, this is right, this is what I'm doing. They can be very task oriented. They try to avoid feeling like they're flawed. They do not like making mistakes. So I think it's harder for the 1 to be able to admit that they're wrong. So that's a place of growth, humility as they grow. There is a core fear of corruption, and their core emotion is anger. And so, in growth, they can learn to pursue more peace. And then growth tips would be to just learn to practice stillness, to learn how to have self-compassion. I feel like the 1s can feel very, typically more type A personality, and can kind of fall into, if you're not careful, fall into this maybe a little bit of legalism, or like having to be a little more black and white in the way. Yeah. And so learning how to just be able to like be flexible, and learn like your way can be great, but other people could have good ways too. Learning how to listen to other people and put yourself in their shoes, and learning how to play. I think they're great because the 1s are always like, everybody can benefit having a 1 in their life, because like they're going to get stuff done. Like I have several 1 people in my life, and like they are Johnny on it. You can trust them with a task. They will finish it. It'll complete it, and it'll be beautiful. But like learning for them how to like the lightness of life, and learning how to play a little bit more, and maybe not taking everything as seriously, like certain things to be serious about, but not everything has to always be so tailored and feeling like they have to have everything perfect.
Yeah. And that's a really good reminder, because I think it is the false self, like we said, that makes them feel like they can never make mistakes. They
Right.
always have to be perfect or making things better. And
Mm-hmm.
so that can just be a very rigid, almost like box that you're in.
Right.
And the one getting outside of the box looks like being playful
Mm-hmm.
and spontaneous and lightening up. And,
Right.
they really need that, but it's scary, because
Mm-hmm.
these strategies have brought them to where they are in life, and they've relied on them so heavily to be that one personality. So that was good. Let's move on to two. Two, like you've said a lot, is just they have this gift of service and helping others. They're incredibly empathetic and generous with their time and their resources and their affections. Their core need is to be loved. They really doubt that love at times, and that's what drives them to serve and help others so much. And so just continuing to, if you have a two in your life, reinforcing your continuous love for them is important. They're concerned with image. So all the heart center, twos, threes, and fours are image conscious, and their twos are others focused, and their focus would be on their relationships. And things that they might avoid would be having needs themselves. Every true two that I have ever met is very uncomfortable until they do their work, asking for what they need, setting boundaries. They tend towards codependency, maybe, because their needs are a boundary for love and belonging at times. They
Mm-hmm.
feel like if I have needs and I ask for them, I might be rejected, and I don't want to feel that. So their core fear is being unwanted. And that brings us to their core emotion, which is shame. So any of those things that they might feel would lead towards shame. Like, I am bad, I am wrong, I am not lovable.
Right.
A faith pursuit for a two would be to pursue like godly love, the kind of love that is unending. And just having a perspective of Christ's love is important.
Mm-hmm.
Tips for growth would be to learn to set boundaries, identify your own needs, and work on self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all ways that twos can grow.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Being a wing of a two and then having a daughter that's a two and a mom that's a two, I can say that there's such a healthy shift that happens in the two when they can start to really understand self-love, like just a very grounded place of like, I'm a child of God, just like this other person. And, my needs matter too. And, I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, because I feel like twos can feel selfish at the core. And they feel almost guilty because they just want to give. But yeah, that is a breakthrough for a two, and they can have those boundaries to take care of themselves as well as others, but they matter too. So next up is type 3. This is my type, so I specifically feel a little biased towards this because I can feel these things at my core. But as far as the type 3, the gifts would be they're filled with ambition. They're typically very driven. They're hopeful individuals. They're pretty good at being able to adapt. They do have a need to feel valued. And a lot of the ways that they feel value is through their success. They are more image conscious. They do pay attention to that. So you'll see look a little like polished and take, extra care of the external things. They are very focused on the image and the goals. They set their mind to, and they do not like feeling failure. Failure can feel very scary, but because they are so driven, a lot of the threes will often, I feel, kind of override that because they get so driven to want to feel successful that they'll figure out a way. So typically they're pretty, the ones you see, a lot of entrepreneurs or people that, can be threes. They have a core fear of worthlessness and just being immobile. Like they want to be moving, they want to be doing, they want action, they want to feel like they're taking steps to their goals.
Yeah.
Their core emotion would be shame. So, they can grow in as far as learning how to just pursue love, to tend, to themselves and others. The tips for growth would be learning solitude practices, embrace failures, and know that failure is just a way that you learn. And if we can't allow ourselves to fail, then we're never going to grow, because failure is a part of life. If you try something, it's not going to always work, and that's okay. You just ebb and flow, and you pivot, and you go a different direction until you figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
You can work on self deceit and shape shifting. I think sometimes, the threes can shape shift a little bit because of the image of wanting to appear a certain way or appearing successful. So learning to be more of just your authentic self, which I feel like just comes in time, life, experiencing. And then relational tips for threes would be to celebrate other people's achievements. Threes can, I think, especially in the young three, can sometimes, not all the time, because obviously we aren't putting in a box, but I do think sometimes threes can become more self-focused. So I think growing in faith, growing in maturity, you start becoming more others focused as well, and really not so focused on your own achievement, but really celebrating those around you and being genuinely very happy for them as if it was yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about, along with eights, threes are really good at empowering others to do big things, towards success and things like that. And that's when a three is super healthy. It's really cool to watch. I love it.
Threes can be great cheerleaders because they have a drive in them, and they're social, and I feel pretty influential.
Well, and I think because they have such a radar for success, they can pinpoint people's gifts, and you can call out people's gifts and help others by showing them how they can use their gifts and show. So a 3 and a 9 together is beautiful, because the 3 is calling the 9 to be like, do you see all this amazingness inside of you? And the 9, or maybe potentially a 6, wouldn't necessarily see those things as easily in themselves. And so these relationships together are just gold.
Yeah.
So let's jump into type 4, which is my core type. 4s have a creativity and imagination that isn't always connected to the arts or music or dance or anything like that. Oftentimes it could be. You could be an artist, but there's a sense of imagination and going in your head and creating things in your head, at least, that oftentimes turns into producing beauty in the world. They tend to be very empathetic and love depth, so aware of beauty and depth. Their need is honestly to be understood. 4s feel very misunderstood, or like the outcasts in the group. They just kind of feel like nobody quite gets them. So they're also, with the 2s, 3s, and 4s, concerned with image. And so how that plays out for them is being an individual, being original, or being authentic. They want to be the unique one, because that gives that image of feeling special, which then is how they connect in relationships. A young 4, I know for me, it was, if I made drawings and showed them to people, that was how I connected with people, because they were seeing what I made, which was very unique. Something that 4s focus on is what's missing. So they might go into a situation that is nearly perfect, and they would be quick to see what is a deficit or what's missing. This gets me in trouble in my family all the time, because my brain, my focus just goes first to what's missing. So gratitude is really important to remember. We as 4s will avoid the ordinary or anything plain. Core fear is having no identity. Again, being part of the crowd or just being regular, is that it's kind of painful, because then what am I? Do I have any value? Core emotion would be shame. And that comes out like a melancholy sadness, or just it's kind of feels good sometimes for a 4 to just be sad or sullen, or, not super enthusiastic. And they're okay with it usually. And others want to try to fix it. And you're like, what, why? I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So, but what we can work on for is to pursue love, that Christ love and wholeness. Like I mentioned before, focusing on gratitude when your desire is to see what's missing and finding meaning in the ordinary. I think just going on walks or going into your kitchen with your family and just finding goodness right there in front of you. It doesn't have to be extraordinary.
Right.
That's growth. So then relational tips for a 4 would be have pace with your emotional depth. So you want to dive deep in relationships so quick with people. And that's why people love you. But sometimes it can feel overwhelming for others when you go so deep, so often, so fast. So just pace.
Mm-hmm. And as far as type 5, the gifts of a 5 would be wisdom. They are very good at having analytical skills. They're definitely of the brain type. They're very, very logical. They draw a lot of their decisions on logic. They like clarity. They need to be competent. They want to be informed. They like to just feel like, yeah, they have all the information in front of them. Knowledge is very important to them. That's one of their like main strategies. And they'll think from a lot of different angles. And they are good about being able to take out a little bit more of the heart and the gut and just really focus in on like, what's the logic in this? And they can like make a decision. And I think it's hard for other types sometimes to understand, because if, other types are really thinking with the heart, the 5 is very good about being logical. Like, this is the best, makes most sense from a logical perspective. And their focus is analysis. They avoid incompetence. So they do not want to feel like they can't do something. Like, I feel like a lot of them can have kind of a deficit wound. And I feel like even for a 5, it's not uncommon to see them have if we break it down into attachment theory, a lot of the 5s would, sometimes fall into, I've seen the more of avoidant patterns, and they have a fear of being depleted. So this is also can show up in the avoidant pattern, because in relationships, they can, it's like create fears in their mind about being depleted by somebody when that hasn't even actually happened yet. But it's just, there's a fear of it because they have a certain reserve of energy and they just guard it and protect it. So a lot of times they do need that independence and that solitude. And their core emotion is fear. And growth tips for a 5 would be practice engaging socially. They can be a lot more kind of like in their head on things. A lot of times 5s I see have, again, this isn't trying to put people in a box, but like a lot of times I've seen the 5 have just a few close friends. They're typically not, going to be the type that has like 50 friends and life of the party. So learning to just practice and engage more socially, and then taking action even when things are uncertain.
Yeah, that uncertainty for a 5, I think it just drives so much. 5,
Yeah.
6s, and 7s,
Yeah.
but yeah, being able to kind of balance that out with the heart and the body
Right.
is so important. It's lots of growth.
Right.
And then I think pursuing faith too, because when you think about certainty, um, you know, if you're trying to get all the information and have all the knowledge to be certain of something, and then there's just areas in life, especially with faith, that you just can't. You can't know it all. You can't understand it all. And that's why we have to lean into our faith. And that is huge growth for a 5, to get out of the head and to trust from their heart a God that they don't yeah. Yeah. And then sharing experiences too with others.
Right.
Did you say that? I think you said that.
I don't think I
know.
did.
It was on the next thing.
Yeah.
All right. So then type 6, we're just rolling along here. I feel bad for the 9s. Sometimes they come last. Maybe we'll change it up when we do these episodes. So type 6s, their gift is loyalty to others. So like I mentioned before, 1s, 2s, and 6s are in that compliance stance. So they're focused on others. They're guarding and being prepared for themselves and for others. And they just think oftentimes of, what might go wrong. And so they're preparing. That comes from their need for security and safety. And so, that planning and that anxiety drives them to try to cover every possible scenario, because that calms, at least temporarily, a little bit of the anxiety. They're most concerned with strategies with this, like planning and problem solving. And what they also do is they seek support from others. And this is a way that they might find safety. So again, look to if you're like a social type 6, you might be looking to the leader of a group to help bring safety and security for you. If you're one of the other subtypes, you might, find a close person. And it could be your spouse, or it could be your sibling, or a close friend. But having a trust in yourself is hard. And so that's what that support seeking looks like, because their focus is on their own anxieties and they want relief from that. And so they're looking to alleviate some of that fear. They'll avoid uncertainty, kind of like the 5, but again, they approach it differently. They're trying to plan for worst case scenarios. Their core fear is abandonment. So, like, as we will get to in the next episode, attachment perspectives, but this is a very common one for your anxious, preoccupied attachment style, feeling like, please don't leave me. Then that core emotion would be fear. So pursuing faith is a holy pursuit. It is important to continue to pursue what you are not certain of, what you don't know, and that God is your support. He's the one that you can trust. Growth tips for a 6 would be practicing silence. All the head types need to kind of get quiet. Watch out for how you're suspicious of people too. I think that's that guarding and planning and problem solving can make you overly suspicious of other people at times. And then work on self-soothing. Like, again, in that silence and that aloneness, work on tools, and we're going to share lots of ways to self-soothe, so self-regulation. And then with others, we need to communicate limits, and at the same time, when you're communicating with others, trust yourself, so that could be boundary setting or whatever, and just knowing this is your truth, this is what you need to say, just say it. So that's 6s.
So 7s, I always think about my husband because he is about a 7 as they get. So as far as gifts, and I was just gonna say too, I feel like when you know a 7, you know a 7. Like, I love when I meet 7s because they're usually like, they're social, like, they're like the MacGyvers of the group. They can figure things out and they're just very adaptable, and positive. But so the gifts would be positivity. They're great at being spontaneous. They're very enthusiastic. They do need freedom. So they don't want to just feel completely boxed in by something. They are concerned with strategies as far as being satisfied. So they want to feel satisfied. They focus on what is next. I, can look at my husband and I feel like I call him the Energizer Bunny because he's always able, like, he has a boundless amount of energy and he's always very focused on what's next. What am I doing? And he doesn't, I think they have a harder time sitting still, because they're so focused on what to do next. They avoid emotional pain. They have a core fear of being trapped, which I feel like goes back to the need for freedom. They have a core emotion would be fear. So, I think that starts to shift in them as they start to pursue faith and trusting God with, just the things in their life. Growth tips for a 7 would be to practice stillness, to watch out for distractions or gluttony. And I think the 7s, from what I've, experienced with 7s, I feel like they're funny. I think sometimes even the things they consider stillness aren't actually stillness. Like, they could go run and you could say, this makes me laugh because I just remember this just being real for a minute. But I remember telling my husband, I was like, you should just take more time to just like be still and just like rest and just be, he's like, but I run. That is rest for me. And I'm like, that's recreation. And he's like, but it's restful. And it's like, it's just, they get very, they just, it's hard, I think, for them to truly just be still. And so practicing that, I think is hard for them. But I feel like when they can get still, and I know for Taylor, he's learned in his years of like, okay, if I go to a deer stand, I'm still. And he really walks away feeling like that was really good for me. Like, and he'll journal, he'll like take out time to just be still. And so you can see the growth in the 7 when they do learn those practices, and it just helps balance them out. As far as relational tips for 7s would just be practice mindfulness in their interactions.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely that observing yourself while you're showing up with others. That takes a lot of attention, and their minds are going like 7 different directions. And
Yeah.
so that it takes effort, but like you said, and even the stillness, I was thinking, you're right, for a 7, it is not restful necessarily at first to be still. It's kind of work because it's so counter to how they're typically wired to keep going. But yeah, you see definitely the fruit when they do. So I always think about for type 8s, my husband too, he's a type 8, and he absolutely has this gift of strength and protection and leadership. So 8s are great with that. I think I can think of women 8s in my life that have they just have that same strong confidence as they approach whatever they do in life. So I think a need, though, is to either be in control or just feel like no one's controlling them. It's important for them not to, they're just aware of power all the
Right.
time. They have that concern with justice, like all the other body types, like 8s, 9s, and 1s. And so they're really aware of what's the truth, truth and justice. And so their focus is on power. Like I said, they walk into a room, they can immediately kind of read who is the one carrying the power here. And is it fair? Is it okay? Are they a good person? And so that protection kicks in. And so it's funny, how that shows up in social situations, and how sometimes if Travis feels safe and feels like this is a good space, and the person who's in power is like someone I trust, he's like chill, relaxed, he's in the background. But I'll tell you what, if somebody is in a position of power that he doesn't trust, that he thinks this is not fair, or somebody's getting taken advantage of, I mean, he gets strong quick. It's funny. And so naturally, personally, they will avoid weakness. They don't want to feel like they're without power, that anybody could ever take advantage of them, or, feel like you don't have control over a situation. Their core fear would be being controlled or exposed. I think exposure and vulnerability are things that 8s are very aware of. And having someone truly see them is very vulnerable. Yeah. And then along with the power dynamics and stuff, I think a core emotion for 8s is anger. So for them, it's very obvious and on the surface. It's not repressed. It's not self-directed. It a lot of times goes out. So they're in that assertive stance, and that energy is felt by most people. It's strong. So one thing they can pursue is peace. So that that inner peace, that peace that really only God can give, that passes all understanding. I think that's my husband's favorite Bible verse, because it just deeply resonates, that it's like, this is foreign. I feel angry a lot and I want peace. So growth tips with the 8s, stillness and getting your body still is really, really important. Showing vulnerability and reflecting on intensity. So they show up super intense and really bring that intensity into everything they do. So just being aware of that in yourself can help you in the stillness, like calm it down a little bit and self-regulate so that you don't overwhelm people with intensity. And then relationally, being open to differing perspectives is really important for 8s.
And as far as type 9, the gifts that the 9 has is the serenity aspect. They're typically known as like the peacemakers. They, as far as like the gifts of just like acceptance, they're very unifying. They're good about just kind of like trying to include people and everybody to get along. They have a need to feel comfortable. They are concerned with justice by making peace. I think one of my daughters, my other daughter, I believe she is a 9. and I'm still trying to kind of figure her out, but I think she is. And I just see these tendencies where she does have a way of like the 9, just, it's like in their core, they're just like able to gather people together and like be just this, like, it's like a lightheartedness a lot of them have. They can focus on others' desires. They will avoid conflict. It's really hard for 9s to, it feels very confrontational. Whereas, the 9s, as far as growth tips, I'll just jump ahead because I feel like it connects, but like learning that conflict does not mean that that's bad. Like you can have conflict and it be very healthy and you're talking in a calm manner and you're just having a conversation. It doesn't always equate scary. And I feel like it can feel scary to a type 9. Their core fear would be disconnection. Their core emotion would be anger. So, they could also continue to just pursue peace. Growth tips would be take action, assert your voice, pay attention to your merging with others. I think because as far as like asserting your voice, it goes back with the conflict. They have a hard time really saying how they're truly feeling because it feels like conflict. And so, learning that your voice matters so it's safe to say things and vet for your needs when you do it in a respectful way. Relational tip for 9s would be to take initiative in discussions, learning how to assert yourself and not just always, feeling like, well, I have to be the peacemaker and I have to just always kind of stay sometimes on the fringe to not create conflict or to just keep peace. So, it's okay to take the lead and you can be confident to have an opinion and speak it and speak in.
Right. Yeah. Love 9s. I mean, I think, every number is great. There's positive qualities and shadow sides to every number, but 9s are kind of the sweethearts of the Enneagram. They see things from all perspectives and are just pretty easygoing in a lot of cases. So like everybody just really loves them. It's hard to think of frustrating things about 9s because they do avoid conflicts. They don't frustrate people as much, but at the same time, that's at their own expense. And so, just having that inner security to know your presence matters and your voice matters. It's really good. So that's it. We have gone 1 through 9, and we are going to wrap up our discussion on, the primer for all the Enneagram types that we talked about today. So I wanted to encourage everybody just to really reflect on where you fall. Maybe you don't know exactly what your number is, but you see yourself in a few of these. It's a journey, and just be patient. Don't expect that you're going to land on it right away. A lot of people don't. A lot of people have to really consider it for a while before they figure it out. And that's just that process of self-awareness. So I'd love for you all to check out on our website. We have our quick start guide and an assessment that goes with it. So, the assessment is short. It's a very simple assessment that just helps you think through these patterns where you can print it out and see it in front of you. And then the type by type guide is a lot of what we've talked about today, just sharing the core patterns. And again, this isn't going to cover every aspect of the Enneagram because there's wings and arrows and all these triad groups and instincts and many other influences that help you use the system correctly, but it just takes time to learn all that stuff. So we'll be covering all of that in the future. And so stay tuned for next episode. We are going to discuss Enneagram and attachment. So that'll be fun.
So thanks so much, guys, for just sticking with us today. I hope that you have just some good nuggets that you've been able to walk away with thinking about Enneagram. And we look forward to discussing more in depth in future episodes. But thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. And may you be open to everything that comes to you today because it is for your transformation.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Transforming Us podcast. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation and that you found it helpful. If you loved what you heard, we would really appreciate if you would take a moment and leave us a 5-star review and rating. Your support helps us reach more listeners like you.
And also don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more relationship content. Then if you're looking to take your growth to the next level, check out our coaching services and groups at transformingus.org.
We're here to help you transform your patterns and enjoy more secure relationships.
Until next time, in the words of Raoul Shane, you do not need to do big things. Just do small things in a big way. Then transformation will follow.